Hello and welcome to Nithrania YouTube channel. You're watching another episode of the Game in a Nutshell series designed for explaining the board game rules. My name is Branislav Berec, and in this video we're going to learn how to play Scarce from Toddy's Games. And before we start, let me say that all the components in this video are prototype components. Let's get started. To set the game up, construct this game board, which consists of this surface and the sea floor at the bottom. You can have them as two separate boards next to each other or on top of each other using this structure. Take these tokens, divide them by the type. These are surface tokens. The ones at the bottom are seafloor tokens. They are separated by color. Then separate the tokens with a question mark and place them on the spaces, on these hexes with question marks. There are 6 of them on both the surface and the seafloor board. And then randomly distribute all the remaining tokens, both on the surface board and the seafloor board. With this particular side face up, it's a side with a small black triangle here and some small squares on the seafloor board. Then on the surface board, there are 4 spaces with this small F symbol. These are reserved for foes, and each foe ship has one set of cards corresponding to that foe meeple. It corresponds by the color of this small diamond at the top of the card. And arrange these 3 cards with the card with the highest number of these flash symbols at the bottom and the smallest number at the top. Place this city mineral token on the center space of this seafloor board, and each player places their meeple on the adjacent space to this city mineral token. If you play a competitive mode, tokens with this energy symbol may not be placed on these adjacent spaces to the mineral token. There are always 4 foe ships on the surface board, and there's one sea monster. Place it on any of these outer spaces of the seafloor board and place the monster card somewhere nearby. Then take this city board, shuffle these mission cards and randomly deal 10 on the designated spaces on this city board. Then shuffle the decks of encounter cards, seafloor event cards, surface event cards. Then these are energy leakage cards, they don't need to be shuffled. All the cards are the same, and here we have the player cards and enhanced player cards. Shuffle the decks and randomly deal 3 cards face up. Then this is a time counter. Set this in the ring in such a way that it shows the current number of players in the game. Here we have 3 players. Here we have the symbol for 4 players, 2 players and a single player. And if you play a co-op mode, place this enemy city token on top of this inner ring. Then these are crew tiles. Divide them randomly into 2 stacks and place them in these spaces. These are vessel abilities. Again, randomly divide the stack into 2 smaller stacks. And here we have 3 different types of vessel modules. So divide them into 3 stacks and place them next to the time counter. When you shuffle these abilities, make sure you take out the tiles with this small S. These are starting abilities. Each player receives 1 of them. 1 player board. Starting set of 6 player cards. Again, they have this small S at the bottom of the card. And each player also receives 1 worker token, which is placed on this space. Each player also receives 2 additional workers. These are in your reserve. You will be able to deploy them later in the game. And also the set of these discs and cubes in the chosen color. One of those discs is placed on the first space of the starting ability, which indicates the power level of that ability. And then each player takes 1 cube of their color and places the cube in one of these 4 spaces to indicate which path you want to choose on the city board. Each player shuffles their deck of cards and places it face down next to the player board. Leave some space for the discard pile. In a cooperative mode, each player also receives 1 random captain card. In a competitive mode, place these cards somewhere in the display. Scarce is a cooperative or competitive experience where players need to finish the construction of this enormous nuclear power plant, which powers their floating city. Each player is in control of one dragonfly ship, which is able to travel on the ocean surface, also under the surface, and players will collectively try to gather these resources and deliver those resources to these mission cards in order to construct the power plant. In a cooperative game, players play against this enemy city which is closing on their own city that is represented by this time, and when the time reaches this space, the enemy city token will be placed on the board, and when the enemy city token reaches the space with your own city token, then all players collectively lose the game. If you finish the construction of the power plant before that happens, then players collectively win the game. In a competitive mode, players don't compete against enemy city, they only compete against the time, and when the time reaches this end space, the player with the most points will be the winner. So in this game, players take turns, starting with a randomly chosen first player and then continuing clockwise until the game ends. On your turn, first you have to draw up to 4 cards. Then you can take some instant actions, for example from these kind of crew tiles, or from these missions in case they are completed, or from your captain. You will also be able to buy additional worker tokens and so on. And then in the third phase you can play cards and take actions. You can play these cards in 3 different ways. You can either use the symbol here, which is used to move your vessel, either on the surface, or if you are located at the seafloor, then you obviously move on the seafloor board. Or you can play a card to take the action on the card, or you can discard the card and perform other special actions like diving or resurfacing with your ship, purchasing the crew or vessel abilities or vessel modules, or contributing to your current mission with resources, supplies and energy. You can play as many cards as you want, even all of them. You can also keep some cards for the next turn, but maximum 2 cards. At the end of your turn, if you are still located on the sea floor, you have to draw and resolve the encounter card, which means you will battle some monsters. If you still have more than 2 cards, you have to discard some of them without any effect, and then it's the next player's turn. When you complete the missions on the city board, you can start placing energy and supply in this area, and also uranium at the bottom of the city board. And when you provide enough resources based on the number of players in the game, then you collectively win the game. On the other hand, if the time counter reaches this end space and the enemy city token will be placed on the board and reaches your city, then you collectively lose the game. In a competitive game, you only play against the time, and when the time reaches the end space, the player with the most points is the winner. Players get 10 points for each completed mission, 2 victory points for each piece of supply or energy in this area or uranium at the bottom of the board. When you acquire these enhanced cards, they also have the number here, which are victory points at the end of the game. And there are some other ways how to get few additional victory points, and then the player with the most points is the winner. So, the first phase on your turn is drawing up to 4 cards. Take the cards from your draw deck. If the draw deck runs out, reshuffle the discard pile and create a new draw deck. If you draw the card called Energy Leakage, you have 1 such card in your starting deck. You will acquire more of these cards during the game. Move this time counter 1 space forward, which means you move it to the next line. Now it points towards this F letter, which means foes will move. There are many other icons on this time counter. I will briefly cover them later in the video. There's only one icon which I want to mention right now. It's this one with this red dot. When the time counter reaches that space, you will have to have 1 resource per player on this city mineral token. Basically, each player has to contribute at least 1 resource, 1 cube, to the city. If you fail to meet this condition, again, all players will immediately lose the game. After you draw the energy leakage card and resolve the effect, place the card in your discard pile and immediately draw the new card from your draw deck. Now, if you draw the energy leakage card together with the mechanical assistance card, you can discard both of them without any effect and draw the replacement card for the energy leakage card. In the second phase of your turn, you can take actions, and I would say actions that are not triggered by cards. So, for example, you can take actions from the screw tiles. Here you need to spend 3 energy and 1 supply token to get any one mineral. You will have energy tokens in this area. You can store the supply tokens in this area. So when you spend the indicated number of resources, you can get a mineral. When you gain a mineral, take your cube and place it in one of the spaces which corresponds to that mineral. At the start of the game, you can only collect these 4 types of minerals. Later in the game, you can buy these vessel modules which provide capacity for other types of minerals. When you acquire those vessel modules, you can place them like this under your player board. As you can see, each vessel module can hold another vessel module and also 1 vessel ability. You can have maximum 3 of these vessel modules, 1 module of each type, and you can have maximum 7 vessel abilities, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. These 2 slots are reserved for the crew tiles. Then, if any of these mission cards are completed, for example, the cube is on the card indicated that the mission is completed, you can also take this instant action. You can, for example, spend a supply token to gain an energy. You can also take an action from your captain card, and here, if you spend 2 supply tokens, you can gain another worker token, or to be more precise, you activate another worker token. These worker tokens can be then placed on these vessel abilities to activate those abilities. You can have maximum 3 worker tokens during the game. All these actions are optional. It is not mandatory to take these actions on your turn, but if you do take those actions, you can only take each action once, which means you cannot repeat the same action twice during the same turn. And finally, in the third phase of your turn, you can play cards. You can play them in any order. You can play as many cards as you want, those cards that are obviously face up, and you can play them in 3 different ways. You can either use the card for movement, using the symbol at the top of the card. You can use the action on the card, or you can take the card, discard it, and use another special action, which I'm going to cover later in this chapter. So let's start with the movement. If at the top of the card there is a number in this white area, it indicates the number of spaces you can move on the surface. If there is a number in this darker area, that's the number of spaces you can move when you are at the seafloor level. Some cards don't have the numbers in both areas. For example, here you can only use the cards to move on the surface. You cannot use it to move at the seafloor level. Your basic cards allow you to move 1 space only. Later in the game, when you acquire more powerful cards, the number indicates that, for example, you can move up to 4 spaces on the surface. You can move in any direction, you can even move through other vessels, but you may not end your movement on the space with another vessel or with the foe. If you end your movement on the space with this question mark symbol, question mark hex, but like this, take the corresponding event card, reveal the card and resolve the event, and then return the card to the bottom of the deck. When you move and you move over the tokens with energy or supply or new cards, you don't get any benefits from those tokens. You can only get a benefit from the token if you end your movement on that token. And if you do, for example, if you end the movement on the energy token, you immediately gain the indicated number of energy tokens indicated there. Then you flip the token and you resolve what's on the other side of that token. So here you will also gain one supply token. Then take that surface token and place it somewhere next to your player board. Each such token is worth 1 victory point at the end of the game. The same applies to these supply tokens. Here you get a supply. With this one you would get a new card. You can take any of these basic player cards, choose any of them and place your new card in your discard pile. Don't take any of these enhanced cards. You gain those in a different way. Anytime you gain a new player card, replace it in a display with the card from the other deck, so with the advanced card, and vice versa. Later in the game, if any player takes an advanced card, replace it with the basic card in the display. Actually, it is more convenient to display the cards like this. These are basic cards and these are advanced cards. Anytime any player takes a basic card, replace it with the advanced card. Vice versa, if any player acquires an advanced card, replace that card with a new card from the basic cards. When you end your movement on tokens with minerals, you don't take those minerals immediately. You have to take a specific action from the card. I'm going to cover that in just a minute. You can also find other symbols, usually on the other side of those tokens. You can find a description of all these symbols in the rulebook. They're usually very simple and easy to understand. Instead of using the card for movement, you can take the action on the card, and after you take the action, you discard the card to the discard pile. Now, let's take a look at a couple of those symbols here and a couple of main actions you can find on those cards. One of the most important actions is extracting minerals. In order to take this action, you have to be on the space with a mineral token. In that case, you take all the minerals on that token. When you gain that mineral, again, mark it with your cube. And if the action says flip the token, again, flip the token to the other side and resolve what's on the other side of that token. Here we have another special icon. This represents whirlpool, and that will cause your vessel to dive to the seafloor. To do that, look at the number of the current space. Here we have number 5. And when you dive, let me take the top board away. Find the hex with the same number, here it's number 5, and place your ship, place your vessel on that space. Seafloor contains more precious minerals, and usually you get 2 minerals when you extract the minerals here. This green U symbol indicates uranium, and you place the cube in this area of the city board. Each player has to place 3 uranium cubes here. But staying at the seafloor is more dangerous. At the end of the turn you will face an encounter, but otherwise all the movement rules and other actions are the same as on the surface board. Now, this space with the whirlpool, this token remains in that space for the remainder of the game, and you will never resurface in the same space. So first, you will have to move on the seafloor to another space, and then using another action you will be able to resurface in the same space with the same number. Then some cards will allow you to take actions with the worker tokens. You must take the worker token and relocate it to any other space with that kind of worker token. So for example to this vessel ability, and then you can perform the ability. In this example, I would gain 1 energy, and then, after you take the action on these vessel abilities, move this token to the next space, which means next time you take this action, you will gain 2 energy tokens. So those abilities become stronger. However, remember that when you take the worker action, you must take the worker and you must move it somewhere else. That means you may not take that worker token and simply place it back to the same action. You have to move it somewhere else and take the action elsewhere. When this marker on the vessel ability reaches the last space, you get the permanent, most powerful effect from that ability. If the card contains this city icon, You simply move the time counter one space forward. If it triggers some of these icons, resolve those icons immediately. If the card contains this F icon, all 4 foe meeples will move towards the nearest player or towards the city. All these foes move by one space. If the player or city or 2 players are the same number of spaces away from the foe, then you choose which way the foe moves. And when any of these foe meeples would end in the same space as one of the vessels, you will have to battle that foe at the end of the turn. I will cover the battles later in the video. If the foe meeple reaches this center space, the mineral city token, advance the time counter by 4 spaces, and that may trigger some unexpected events. Then remove the top foe card of the corresponding meeple and return the foe meeple to the starting space indicated by the F letter on that space. So the third way of using the cards is simply discarding the card and then taking a special action. You have several options here and you can only choose one. The first option is either diving or resurfacing. Remember, you can only dive and resurface to the space with the same number. So here we have the blue vessel at 41, so it may only resurface back to the space with number 41. The second option is to contribute to your current mission. Here you have the specific minerals, sometimes supply tokens, sometimes energy. With one action you can take as many mineral tokens and as many energy and supply tokens as you want. If you have to use a supply token or the energy token, return the token to the general supply and use one of your cubes instead and place it on the symbol you have contributed with. The same applies for the minerals. Here we have 2 pink minerals, 1 blue mineral, so you can place your cubes on those minerals. You don't have to finish the mission with one action, but for the sake of explanation, let's say you complete the mission. When you do, take all the cubes back to your supply. Mark the completed mission with your cube to indicate that you have completed that mission. You will score 10 victory points for that mission. Then take 1 energy leakage card and add that card to your discard pile. And then you can move to any card in the row above. You can indicate which card you chose by one of your cubes. Later in the game, when you have no more empty cards, you can choose a card where another player is already present. And later in the game, when that mission is completed, the player who contributed the most to the mission will score 8 victory points. The other player will score 2 victory points. However, each player who contributed to that mission will gain an energy leakage card. In case of a tie, let's say both blue and yellow player will have the same number of cubes on that mission card. All tied players will mark that mission card with their cube. They all will score that mission card. In case one player completed all their missions, so 1 mission from each row, that player can help other players with their missions. When a player completes 1 mission in each row, or in this example, there are no other missions to be completed, that player can start supplying energy and supply tokens to this area of the power plant. Every time you do that, mark it with your cubes. Each player must contribute with 3 energy, 3 supplies, and as I said earlier, 3 uraniums. And when that is completed, players win the game. Another option is to transfer some minerals from your player board to the city mineral token, to this central space. You can either transfer only 1 of those minerals, but you can also contribute more if you want to. Because as soon as this time counter reaches or exceeds this icon, the icon with this red dot, the city mineral token must contain at least as many cubes as there are players in the game. So for example, 3 cubes in a 3-player game. It doesn't have to be 1 cube from each player. One player can contribute with more cubes. but as long as there are enough cubes there, the game continues. Otherwise, in a cooperative mode, all players immediately lose, but in a competitive mode, the game continues, but each player who has not contributed there loses one, either surface token or the seafloor token. If the game continues, take all the cubes back. For each cube you have contributed, take one energy, and the game continues. Then another option after discarding the card is to hire a crew, buy the vessel ability or buy the vessel modules. When hiring a crew member, pay the indicated number of supply tokens here, then take the token and place it in one of the empty slots on your player board. With one action, with one discarded card, you can recruit up to 2 crew members, and if you do, and you already have all the slots full, you have to choose one of those crew members, replace it with a new one, and return the previous one back to one of the stacks. In order to buy a vessel ability, you have to spend 2 supply tokens. With one action, you can only take one vessel ability and place it in any available vessel ability space on your player board, but unlike the crew members, if you are full, you cannot discard a vessel abilities to replace it with another one. And finally, with one discarded card, you can buy one of these vessel modules. In order to do that, you have to spend 2 energy, and in addition to that, as this symbol indicates, you can buy or take one enhanced card. Those are these type of cards. Take the card and place the new card in your discard pile. Vessel modules are placed here. You can only have one vessel module of each type. If you end up in the same space as a foe meeple, you have to defeat that foe. In order to do that, you have to spend the amount of energy printed on the current foe card for that color. Remember, each foe card has the color here which corresponds to that foe. And if you do, if you win the battle, gain whatever is listed on the card. If you lose, again, resolve the effect at the bottom of the card. If you lose, the card stays where it is. If you win, the card is removed from the game, and the foe meeple is returned back to the starting space for that foe. If the same foe is defeated for the 3rd time and the 3rd card is removed, then remove also the foe meeple. If you are at the seafloor level at the end of the turn, you have to resolve the encounter. Flip the top card of this encounter deck. The card has the number at the bottom, here it's 2. That indicates the number of spaces you have to move this sea monster towards the nearest player. And then you have to battle with this virtual monster. Again, in order to defeat it, you have to spend the amount of energy listed on the card. If you do, you gain what's listed on the card. If you lose, resolve the effect here. And in addition to that, if you lose, you also resurface. If you win, you stay at the seafloor level. Then take the card and place it to the bottom of the encounter deck. If this sea monster reaches the space with the player vessel, take the sea monster card and again perform the battle in the same way. In order to defeat it, you have to spend this amount of energy. If you win, gain the rewards. If you lose, resolve the effect and resurface. I have already talked about this time counter before, but there are a few more details I need to talk about. As I said, every time you move it and it aligns with an icon, resolve that icon. Here, the player who triggered this will get a supply token. Here you get an energy token. If it aligns with these Fs, all the foe moves. If it aligns with these question marks, resolve the event based on where the current player is located, either on the surface or the seafloor. If it's aligned with these numbers 2 and 2 here, move the sea monster. If it aligns with these worker tokens, perform a worker action. And when it goes all the way and aligns with this end space, so it looks like this, In a competitive mode, this triggers the end of the game and players count their scores. In the competitive mode, take this enemy city token and place it in any outer space on the surface. You can collectively decide which space it's going to be. No vessel can occupy the same space as the enemy city. In case the enemy city moves, for example, it would move to this space, the vessel is pushed away to any adjacent space, the adjacent space of your choice. And by the way, you move the enemy city every time this time counter would have to move. The time counter doesn't move any longer, instead this city is moving towards the player city. If that happens, if the enemy city reaches this central space, all players lose. At the end of the game, if you win the game, if you complete this power plant before the time runs out, so before the enemy city token reaches your city, calculate the final score for each player. First of all, score 10 victory points for each mission where you have your cube. So here, yellow player would get 40 victory points, brown player 30, blue player 20. Then 2 victory points for each energy supply and uranium placed on the city board. Then 1 victory point for each energy token remaining, each supply token. 1 point for each seafloor or surface token. And don't forget to score victory points from your enhanced cards. It's this number on the card. Sum up all your scores and that's your total score for the entire team. In a competitive mode, the game ends as soon as any one player completes 4 missions and supplies the power plant with 3 energy, 3 supplies and 3 uranium. The game also ends if the time counter aligns with this end space. In that case, count up the victory points in the same way as in the cooperative mode, and then the player with the highest score is the winner. So that's how you play Scarce. If you have any questions or comments, I'll do my best to answer as many as I can. If you like the series, please subscribe. You can also support the channel on the Patreon page. You've been watching Game in a Nutshell. My name is Branislav Berec and hope to see you next time. I would like to thank everyone who has ever supported the channel and especially the current supporters listed on this page. If you too would like to support the channel in creation of videos like this and other video tutorials and other content on this channel, please visit the patreon.com/Nithrania.